Hey, I'm John. Welcome to Edgetone Studios. This is just my studio update for November 21st, 2023. I've got my digital console back in the studio. I'm working on wiring, and I thought I would give an update on the way my crazy brain works on all this planning. I've been through these planning processes a few times with the first studio build, with the switch to the mixer, with the plan switch to the console, and now with the switch back. But before I did that, or before I get to that, I got my first crazy YouTube comment this morning, and I was quite happy because it's just, random online internet people. They're funny. So my comment was on my third part of how I built my Pro Studio, which I called it Pro Studio, whatever. And the fellow says, or gal, but I'm thinking it's a fellow. Who knows? You wasted a lot of money. Anyone at his home studio room can make music. The only thing needed is many teras of pirate software. A camping tent is enough. Which I just found quite funny. So I replied, ha ha ha, oh no, exclamation. Guess I'll tear it all down then. Well, of course, if you reply. So the response is 18 points about carbon activated or activated carbon being the only thing that can stop bass frequencies, how I have to mount my monitors, how my Alzheimer's should be treated, which Alzheimer's, where'd they get that? How I'm just another rich American. I'm Canadian. Yes, I'm reasonably well off because I have a pension and a house and threw all my money into a beautiful studio. So I'm not denying that, but it's just find it so funny. So I don't know. I almost replied to that one again with something like, I love you. Take care of yourself or something like that. But I think I'll just leave it for now. Anyways, when I brought the mixer back in the studio after the console had been in here for 2 weeks and I'd spent 2 weeks listening to all sorts of music on it, I hooked it up. I just hooked up the mix out and my speakers and got to the point while I was planning things so I could be hearing music while I was planning my slight rearrangement of cabling. When I heard the difference, I had that feeling of, shoot, maybe I should have kept the console. But it wasn't massive, but it was enough, and it was really a noticeable difference in the dynamic range. It felt a lot more compressed on the Presonus, and the bass frequencies were less pronounced. They sounded much better before. And I kind of mulled that over a bit and thought, well, why should it sound that much different when I was just coming out of the computer through the tape return, through the console, so basically through the master section on 2 channels, and back up my speakers? I wouldn't think it would be that drastic until I realized that I was using a different audio interface. I was using the Motu 16A as my converter for the console. So since I still had the Motu 16A sitting here, I hooked it up and took a listen and went, wow, that was the difference between the Presonus and the Motu 16A. I've never done an actual shootout. I'd heard the universal audio converters when I was on UA Apollo. When I went to Presonus, I didn't feel like I got a worse experience. But when I went on to Motu, I felt like, wow, that was a better experience. So that made me start hatching a plan of how could I upgrade my converters in my Presonus? Because I like this console. I like the digital workflow. Yes, I'd love an analog desk because of analog. It's cool. But I have outboard gear. I have the right type of stuff for recording chain. And then I realized that the Presonus has a digital output, the AES out on XLR. I mean, it's not audio, even though it's on XLR. It's AES EBU digital signal going out. And I realized if I saw a converter that had AES in as one of the inputs, then I could put front end that in front of the digital mixer, listen to the converters of that. So that's what I did. I went out looking and realized that Burl makes their B2 Bomber DAC. That's exactly what it has. It has 2 AES inputs and SPDIF and etc. So I looked for a used one, found one here in Canada at a reasonable price, and sold one of the Motus and used that to pay for the Burl DAC. So that's on its way, and I'm looking forward to hearing the difference. And what I'm going to do, one of the things I planned, is to take my Coleman Audio monitor switcher, and I'm going to have the monitors outs going to one of the inputs, and I'm going to have the burl DAC going to another one of the inputs, and I can just physically A/B between the Presonus and the burl, and I want to hear what that difference sounds like. I'm quite excited about that. So what's changing here? Well, the first thing that was going on was I was trying to see if there was another way I could simplify, because the first thing I started doing was going, oh, now I've bought an additional external reverb unit. How can I hook that up as well and have that connected? And because that was for the console, and I bought I used to have in my blue rack that it was at the back of the room, a DPM-7 by Yamaha. That's an 87 digital mixer with built-in chorus and effects. And the thing I wanted on that was the Yamaha symphonic chorus, because it's got that 80s sound. I haven't found that in a plugin yet. There may be one, but I haven't looked hard enough to know if there's one worth getting. And I just thought it'd be cool to have that instead. So when I sold the mixer, I got a SPX 90, and I plan to put that in place instead as one of my returns on my mixer. So I have to use a couple channels for that. And as I started working through these changes and making a map of all the cabling, I started thinking, could I get rid of a couple synthesizers? Because I bought the AX80 on a whim, because I used to own one twice. That was the second synth I ever owned in the 80s. I always felt like I had the poor man's synth because I couldn't afford a DX7 back then. But in retrospect, it's a pretty cool sounding synth, and I like the sounds. And I also bought the Korg DW8000 on a whim, because someone was selling one reasonably cheap in Victoria, and we ended up using that a lot on our album. It just has a nice sound to it that's very specific. It's not crazy complicated, and I've got the external programmer for it. So I considered putting those two aside, going to 3 synths on each wall. I like the symmetricality of the synths on each wall stacking up. But I started going through as well, how do I lay things out so that when I'm sitting, I can access all the knobs on the synths that you program with knobs as opposed to membrane buttons. And long and the short of it is I ended up deciding to keep both those synths after all, and have now put all the non-membrane synths above my polyevolver, and that's moved my DW8P controller for the DW8000 into my rack that's beside those units, and off the wall mount rack I had. And then here on the other side, I've basically just stacked 3 keyboards, moved them as low as possible. I can basically reach all the controls there, and then put my Matriarch, which replaced my Sub 37, as it's going to have its own stand. I just was trying it out on the stool here to see if it was going to feel good in the space. Part of my brain goes, oh, it's not symmetrical, I don't like it as much, but it really is quite functional this way. With the stool, I can just go between all the 4 keyboards on one side, or on the other side, go between the other ones. So that was part of it. I rearranged my rack a little bit. I pulled the Vermona DRM-1 Mark IV and put it in my side rack beside me, because one of the things I found is I often would start programming beats with it, and then I'd have to be over there. I'd have to play the beat and then adjust the sound, and then come back to record actual sequences, whereas now I can reach it beside me. And then in doing all this moving around, I decided to take the cabinet that was at the back for my DMP7 that I'd made very tall so it could take all the cables out the top, and modify it down to be 8U but not have this extra height at the top. And instead of turning it into a side rolling side cart like I was planning to, I left it as a freestanding rack, and I'm keeping it up at the front just to hold a few more pieces of rack gear. So sort of switching things around. The other thing that happened is after trying out the AVB, I got pretty excited about how easy it worked, and I started thinking, man, if I had the 64S Studiolive console, then I could expand beyond 36 inputs. I could have everything connected at once without having to repatch anything when I go between composition mode, where I use my synths, and recording mode, where I tend to use the mic ins that are coming from the tracking room. after a bit of digging and going down that rabbit hole, I decided that no, it's simpler if I keep what I have, but maybe I could still find a way to use the AVB. And I decided to look for a 16R rack, use that for the extra line-in connections, because the 32S only has 16 line-ins, and all of them are mic in, but only the last 16 connections are line-ins. So with the 16R, it also has combo jacks, so it can have 16 line-ins as well that I could use for the radial workhorse 500 series. So all my external pre's have to go into line-in; they can't go into mic in. And then these extra effects that I have can't go into mic in; they have to go into line-in. And after searching and looking at the prices and going, I don't want to pay $1,500 to $1,900 for one, because I really could just do this through the patch bay. I suddenly went on Facebook Marketplace and did a search, and lo and behold, there was one in Victoria for $1,000. So I picked that up. That's now behind my rack, and I've just remapped everything out to go through only 2 48 port patch bays instead of the 4 I had before. So I'm going to have a lot more of my inputs coming in direct, effects, and the keyboards are basically all going to come in direct. So they won't be patchable to the external mic pre's. I'm not so concerned about that. I can just use the software-based compressors if I need them, and digital effects. And then I got to rearranging my rack. So I moved the 11 rack to the top because I always found it really hard to see the menu while it was farther down. I put my amp 500 back on the right-hand side where it used to be, and the burl's going to go right under that. So basically I don't have to reach past my keyboard to that side at all. Everything's on my left-hand side. My left hand is also my more functional hand. Because of my Parkinson's, my right hand is worse. So this kind of works for me. There'll only be 2 patch bay units. And then I had to start figuring out my cabling all over again, because since I moved things around, they weren't going to be in the same spots. And when I was doing my last reconfig, I tried to get the shortest cables possible for every piece of gear, so that the cables weren't overly long and taking up space and making it hard to reach things. So I bought these 3-foot snakes for the radial workhorse because the patch bay was right under it. But now the radial's at the top and the patch bay's at the bottom, and they don't reach. So I'm in the middle. I've got cables everywhere. I think I've mapped everything out. I think all I have to do now is resolder 15 of my synth cables coming in to be XLR, so they can go in direct. And I've got enough cables for everything else just to reroute things so that I can get at everything. So after this studio update, which will probably take me till midday, I'm going to get to soldering and repatching, and in a couple days I'll have everything reconnected. I figured out where everything's going. I figured out the cable map. I'm working on my patch bay labels, which takes me an hour or so because I manually create these little labels. But I only have to do 2 this time instead of 4. So that's where I'm at. Studio update for November is about to be back in Presonus land. I'm about to upgrade the converters. I've got a slightly different layout. I'm keeping all my keyboards. I sold my one drum machine. I'm planning on getting a Tempest, but I'm waiting for another couple pieces of gear to sell that we're going with the console. And if the console sells, well, then that'll help pay for anything else going on here too. So again, thanks for watching. I appreciate that you do. It's kind of fun making these. Now I just feel like I'm this guy on a TV show who talks about himself all the time, which is kind of what I do. But I never expected to be a guy on a TV show talking about himself all the time in my life. That was never my intention. Looking forward to actually sharing music. That's coming soon. We've got our photo shoot came back. We got all our photos for a band, and I think it'll be first week of January will be our first single coming out. So I will share updates on that and every single that comes out, and try and promote us on this channel as well. Even though we have our own YouTube channel for Waveform Mountain, there is not a lot happening on there right now. So again, thanks for watching. I rambled again like I always do. Talk to you later. Bye.